He was a KGB officer in Dresden in East Germany in 1989, who experienced the advance of democracy and democratic revolution in Eastern Europe as a personal blow. It ruined his career. It wrecked the Soviet Union. He was a believing part of that autocracy. It destroyed it for him. He then went back to Russia. He made a career in a very corrupt moment. He was part of a group of, again, mostly KGB and regime people who stole a lot of money, brought it back into Russia, laundered it. Eventually, he came to power. He's afraid of the Ukrainians who've actually staged in the last 30 years 3 democratic revolutions, once against the Soviet Union and then twice against kind of autocratic leaders who are trying to deprive them of the right to vote. They have, pushed back. They've insisted on democracy. They, even their current president, who's a former television star, he was a comedian, is sort of a symbol of that. I mean, he's also he came to power as an anti-elitist. For Putin, they represent a challenge to his authority, his autocracy, his kleptocracy, and therefore he wants them, eradicated as a nation, and he wants them to become part of Russia again. That's a very complicated question. I mean, Ukraine, like any country, actually, there are regional differences, just like there are in Germany or in Britain. It's not the case that Russian-speaking Ukrainians are Russians. In fact, on the contrary, it's a bilingual country. Everybody speaks both languages. I'm sure there are some Russian speakers in Ukraine who would be sympathetic to Russia or who have relatives in Russia. What there is not a lot of enthusiasm for is being invaded by Russia. And there is, on the contrary, the example of what's happened to places that are invaded by Russia, including these 2 little tiny provinces in eastern Ukraine that are now were occupied by Russia in 2014. The example of what's happened to them is not encouraging. I mean, those are basically kind of terrorist states. They're extremely poor. Everything is chaotic. I mean, the idea of being part of that kind of chaotic occupation zone is not attractive to anybody. So I don't think there's any enthusiasm for a Russian invasion. But it is not the case that there are large parts of eastern Ukraine that wish they were Russian. That's not true at all. On the contrary, there have been big marches actually in some eastern Ukrainian cities in the last few days. And Kharkiv is a city that is largely Russian speaking. It's very near the Russian border, and they had a huge demonstration where people waved Ukrainian flags, and they don't want to be occupied. Again, Ireland is an interesting comparison. Ireland used to be part of Great Britain. Lots of people in Ireland speak English. That doesn't mean they're English. I don't really believe that for example, a U.S. promise, we promise never ever to admit Ukraine to NATO. I don't believe that's really going to end the problem. I don't think that's his main problem with Ukraine. And when he invaded Ukraine in 2014, which you'll remember he did 8 years ago, he wasn't talking about NATO at all. So the NATO narrative is post hoc. It's new. He's re-extracted it out of the past, and he sort of used it as a justification for what he's doing. I feel threatened, and therefore I have to invade Ukraine. I mean, that's not logical because he isn't threatened. Actually, the U.S. has done not so badly. I mean, in the last few months. I mean, so the U.S. has done something unusual, which is that Biden and his team, as I said, they got some intelligence leaks in November and December that this military buildup was coming. They began warning people. They've been talking to U.S. allies in Europe and trying to get them on board with the sanctions package. They've been talking to the Ukrainians. They've warned them. And they've been very loud about this whole thing in a way that has denied Putin something he's used in the past, which is this element of surprise. And so the Biden administration has tried very hard to push that off. And I admire them for doing that. I think while at the same time actually offering Putin an off-ramp, here's some negotiations you can join if you would like to. We're prepared to talk about new arms deals, security deals in Europe. I mean, they are prepared to talk about that, and some of them are necessary, in fact. And so they're prepared to discuss in a civilized way.